So two phrases, one from the beginning of the word, one from the end. And on the seventh day, God ended his work which he had done, and he rested on the seventh day. And another book was opened, which is the book of life, and the dead were judged according to their works. These two phrases point to the never-ending struggle of finding that critical balance in our lives between work and rest. After the Lord had finished his cycle of creating, it says he rested. And yet it is clear that for us, when we die and we move on to the next world, we will be judged, it says, according to our works, by the things that we do. And so we want to make sure that when our book of life is being reviewed, that there are not a lot of blank pages where we have simply penciled in our memo section, resting again. The beginning of a new school year is a great time to talk about finding that appropriate balance between work and rest. Many of us have experienced somewhat of a culture shock as we are now looking to saying goodbye to the lazy days of summer, and we're looking ahead to the busy weeks of working through a new school curriculum. Think about our children. They go from biking, hanging out, playing video games, watching movies, sleeping in, to getting up early, sitting through classes, doing homework, going to bed again at a decent hour. Parents go from having summer vacations and free, relaxed evenings to a regular work schedule again, making lunches and evenings filled with assisting on homework. The bottom line is that right about now, probably many of us are wishing that the lazy days of summer could continue just a little bit longer. Perhaps we are even relishing the idea that someday when we get to heaven, we're going to enjoy an eternal rest from our labors. Didn't the Lord say, "Come to me, all you who labor and are burdened, and I will give you rest"? Surely we might think to ourselves, we have earned a little bit of rest and relaxation. And this leads us to our main message in the passage that we read from Doctrine of Charity, number 168, where it stated that every good worker looks to the Lord, shuns evils as sins, and in particular shuns one certain evil, because it is the devil's pillow. And do you remember what that evil was? It was idleness. Idleness was called the devil's pillow. One passage in the writings even goes so far as to say that idleness is the root of all wickedness. That's an astounding statement, because when we think of idleness, we might not put it in the category of hatred, lying, cheating, stealing, committing adultery, but it says idleness is the root of all wickedness. And before we go on, it's important to make a necessary distinction. Recreation or rest in itself is not idleness. When the purpose of that rest and relaxation is to revitalize and recharge so that we can return to our activities and usefulness refreshed and with renewed vigor, this is not idleness. This is why, in fact, the Lord instituted a Sabbath day where we could intentionally rest from our labors. Idleness, however, is a very different thing. We're told that heaven is a kingdom of useful services. In fact, performing uses is the very lifeblood of heaven, because it says the Lord inflows with love and delight into uses, and this is what gives life. Idleness is diametrically opposed to performing uses and thus to the life of heaven. It provides no positive receptacle or outlet for the Lord to flow into and give life. The Heavenly Doctrine says that performing uses is so essential to the life of heaven that it says everything was formed from use, in use, and for use. Consequently, it says that heavenly happiness consists in use, stems from use, and is proportionate to use. These teachings make it crystal clear that in its essence, life all boils down to performing useful service to our neighbors. And to the degree we do this, we will find both satisfaction and joy. Idleness, however, has a debilitating and crippling effect intellectually, emotionally, and physically. Think about it. Physically, we know that a person who's been bedridden for a long period of time has muscle atrophy set in, and they lose the ability to move themselves about. Emotionally, a person who is not engaged in some sort of useful activity tends to end up facing bouts of depression and melancholy. Think about a person intellectually who is not actively involved in some kind of stimulating endeavor, finds that their mind begins to wander into unhealthy, often, and unproductive areas. And idleness has the same crippling effect spiritually. Eventually, the spiritually idle person finds that they see no real meaning or purpose in life, and consequently experience no genuine or lasting joy in any facet of their lives. There are many interesting reasons why idleness has such a devastating effect. When a person is not focused on performing a use, often their spirit and their mind tend to wander aimlessly, and inevitably they find themselves entering into the territory of their proprium. That part in each one of us that contains our hereditary tendencies towards evil. However, we're told when a person is focused and intent on performing a use, then their minds, it says, are fenced around and circumscribed as though in a circle. In a sense, it's a little bit like circling the wagons around the use that the mind is focused on. And this circling of the wagons keeps the mind from wandering into those dangerous territories. And from that secure and that directed vantage point, it can see and identify those lurking tendencies towards evil within ourselves, and it can also help us to notice those evils that are outside of ourselves. But in a state of idleness, where the mind is bored and unfocused, then the boundaries are thrown open, and the person is more prone to wander into their inherent loves of self and of the world. Therefore, the bored and the idle person is more likely, we're told, to enter into gossip, slander, fraud, promiscuity, lust, vanity, drunkenness, excessive pleasures, vindictiveness, and hatred. This is why idleness is called the root of all wickedness. As an example, think of a teenager or even an adult who has, as the expression goes, time on their hands. Don't we read in the papers about how they get involved often in drug use, alcohol, vandalism, surfing the internet for porn, and so on? But the statistics show for those involved in some gainful employment, they do dramatically better. There was something that happened in my former pastorate almost every summer. It was typical towards the end of summer, after the kids have been out of school for a long time, they started wilding and doing vandalism around the community. And then miraculously, when they got back to school and focused again on something, the vandalism tended to stop. The reason this is so is because idleness, in being the devil's pillow, we're told also acts like a sponge. Just as a sponge in a bucket of water soaks up not only the water, but also all the filth and dirt that is present in the water, so the idle mind soaks up all the hellish impurities of our proprium and all the filth that is around us. It is only the love of use and the process of being engaged in that use that causes our minds to be taught and in a state where it can repel those impurities from being absorbed. Useful service is the antidote to idleness. Think about a young child with nothing to do. When they are bored and they have nothing productive to do, typically during the summer months, they tend to bicker, fight, and whine. However, when they're given a job to do, and they're shown how to do it, then their attitude can change dramatically. Have you ever witnessed the delight on a child's face the first time they actually accomplish a useful job? Like when they turn a screw into the wood, or they buckle their sister's car seat in, or they get their own drink at McDonald's. Their face beams with joy and satisfaction because they have accomplished a use they had not previously mastered. Their mind is engaged in a productive endeavor, and therefore they tend not to get involved in the same destructive behaviors that they do when they're idle and bored with nothing to do. And the same thing holds true for adults. When they love their job and perform their use with vigor, their outlook on life tends to be optimistic rather than depressed. Now, on this earth, we have a choice as to whether we will be useful, industrious, and active, or idle, lazy, and slothful. Those who choose to be idle and not serve the common good of society, the writings say, cannot be called citizens, but destroyers of citizens and the human race. However, we're told that in the next life, we will not have the choice to be useless. Everybody has to perform a use. It is mandatory that uses are performed. We're told that the difference is that in hell, all their uses are performed from fear. But in heaven, those uses are performed from love. And it is love that imparts joy and happiness. So really, our choice is to work in fear and be miserable, or to work from love and be happy. The choice to be happy or miserable really is ours, but one thing is certain: in the next life, we will be useful, whether we like it or not. So as we're heading into this new school year, and perhaps, if we're honest, maybe all of us are wishing that those carefree days of summer were going to last a couple of more weeks, it does provide a useful time for us to reflect on these teachings about idleness being the devil's pillow and the root of all wickedness. If we are honest with ourselves, we probably have realized that by the end of summer, both we and our children are ready for some structure and getting back to some useful activities. But at the same time, let's not forget that our rest and our relaxation over the summer has served a very useful purpose. Like a bowstring, the mind cannot stay perpetually taut, or it will lose its strength and its elasticity. We need periods of rest. We just need to make sure that our rest does not turn into idleness. To be truly useful and productive in life, we need to find that critical balance between work and rest. And as we head into the busy part of the year, it will be important for us to maintain an appropriate balance so that we don't burn ourselves out. Perhaps the Lord has given us the obvious solution right at the beginning of the Word in the first chapter of Genesis. In the account of the creation story we read, where it said, "On the seventh day, God ended his work which he had done, and he rested on the seventh day." So let us be useful and work hard, produce good fruit for the Lord in our various endeavors. Let us shun idleness as a pestilence by keeping our minds taut and focused, and then rest on the seventh day. If we do this, we should be able to strike that perfect balance and at the same time honor the Lord's words in the third commandment. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord your God. In it you shall do no work. For in 6 days the Lord made the heaven and the earth, the sea, and all that is in them, and rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. Amen.